Pardesi Beats.
What's up, everybody? You're tuned into Pardesi Beats Unplugged. Welcome into episode number 11. In today's episode, we'll be talking about the world of professional wrestling. And more specifically, we'll be talking about our Mount Rushmore of greatest wrestlers of all time. So our top 4, maybe 5 greatest wrestlers of all time. I am M. Tadwal. With me today, as always, we have Kushwant Singh and the one and only Patwant Singh. How you guys doing?
The one and only Billy Gunn. No,
the
okay.
one Billy Gunn. I mean,
Yeah.
he might make your list, but professional wrestling is really interesting, especially being of a Punjabi background. I think if we look at not only professional wrestling but just wrestling, kabaddi, kushti, those things have always been a part of the Punjabi culture. And I think the natural adaptation for us growing up in Canada was wrestling was always on the TV for some reason. At some point, all of us were drawn to wrestling. Some of us are still drawn to wrestling and still watch it with an unhealthy obsession. But even if you look at the lineage of wrestling, people like Tiger Jeet Singh, Gama Singh, those guys were around in the 80s and before. But even now, you have people in the WWE like Jinder Mahal, the Bollywood Boys, Jora Jawal in AEW, Thunder from Jalandhar, if we're going a bit local. But there's wrestling has kind of
Shanky,
emanated in our
boy Shanky.
I mean, the Great Khali, if we're getting international. But wrestling has always been a huge part of, I think, growing up in the Punjabi culture. So I felt like it was a really natural topic to talk about, especially with me and Kush. We kind of have that unhealthy obsession with wrestling still. Even if we don't watch it all the time, we're definitely talking about it all the time or keeping up on it. So today we will be talking about our Mount Rushmore. I think it's a very objective topic because we all had different upbringings, different likes, and I guess we'll start there. I'll throw this question to Kush first, and then we'll kind of go around and talk about it. What is your earliest recollection of wrestling, or kind of what drew you into the world of professional wrestling?
So I can't pinpoint like a specific image, but there's 2 things I remember from like my childhood, okay? And it was turning on the TV and watching the Attitude Era of WWF play on the TV and just being extremely entertained and just loving everything I was seeing. Didn't matter. It was like from top of the card to bottom of the card. Like there was no lull in like the entertainment. It was, everything was good. Okay, you have guys like Val Venus that was doing his thing. You have like Billy Gunn doing his thing, to Kai and Tai, just like, so your typical like cheesy stereotype stuff, but it's hilarious. Big Boss Man, Ministry of Darkness. So like all these crazy angles, like where you can be like a low tier wrestler in the company's like eyes, right? And where they kind of put you in the standings. But like the programs you were in was so entertaining. And then you have the upper echelon that just captivated your imagination and just made you want to tune in every week. So I remember watching weekly kind of like when I was young, but being like, I was like not even 10 years old at that time, right? I was still like quite young. So I remember like I had to like kind of watch late, a little bit before bed, and I couldn't always like watch because like you're a little kid, you don't get to watch TV that much. There's restrictions. Oh, you got to go to bed, all that kind of stuff, right? So I try to get in as much as I could. And then the other thing I remember, I don't know if this was with once VHS he got it or like if I got it as a gift, I don't remember, but like we had this like best of WrestleMania series,
yeah, that was mine.
VHS tape, and like I really got into it with that. Like I watched that so many times, and then that's like where the '80s wrestlers for me were kind of I kind of learned about them because like I didn't know those guys because I never watched them, obviously, right? And I grew up in the '90s, so you guys like, oh yeah, Macho Man Randy Savage. So you got your characters like him, super flashy, really good wrestler in that kind of era. Although with like WWF standard, you didn't always see wrestling. Oh, Hulk Hogan. But you if you guys like, there's like saw special matches like when these guys went to Japan or something for showcase matches, like you could see them like just work so incredible, like how great they were, like Ric Flair's, all that stuff. So those things I kind of went and watched back later on in life, but the first kind of exposure was like through that VHS tape. And yeah, like Bret Hart, like I saw like all his promos in there.
Yeah, and I think like Bret Hart, especially for us growing up in Alberta, we're like, oh, he's from right here.
Yeah.
So like that was for me one of the main attractions. But I'll throw it over to Patuant. What drew you in, or kind of if you have your first memories?
Mine were, it's hard to tell, but I know one of my early recollections were being at my Nana's house when they lived in Quesnel, BC. So shout out to any of my family who's watching. So, I mean, it'd be on the TV and he'd be sitting there with his younger brother, my Shota Nana. So they'd both be watching and they'd be like, yelling at each other because they didn't like who each other liked, and they'd be getting mad at each other. They'd be throwing pillows at the TV. And I just remember watching, and then I don't link that to my start of watching wrestling, but then somehow, I don't know how, I don't know when, I just remember being around, I would argue 3 to 5, 3 to 7 years old, in that range, and just watching wrestling on TV and sort of falling in love with the character, especially of one of the wrestlers, but definitely fascinated by, I guess you can say the myth behind this wrestler and the energy they brought and sort of the values they had in their character. And
yeah, that's a good way to put it.
The one I'm referencing, you all know, but
we'll reveal
I'll reveal him later in the show. But that's my reasons for kind of watching. And then, so for me, it was just generally the dynamic personalities, the characters, and the battle between good and evil, which was often there. With, for example, I'll give you a real easy example: Sergeant Slaughter versus Iron Sheik, or something like that. Like it was the American versus the evil doers.
I don't want to get too deep in it, but then Sergeant Slaughter turns on America and becomes an Iranian.
There's a lot to it, but
the beauty
and then there
of
used to be like Russian wrestlers, and it was this whole thing, right? It's
what worked in the time, right?
But the beauty of it is, I whenever somebody asks me, they're like, "Oh, you like wrestling? That's dumb. Like, it's fake, right?" But for me, it's like, it's just my soap operas. Like, I mean, how many people watch drama? How many people watch soap operas? It's essentially that same thing, but with a little bit more athleticism and flips and stuff. So that's kind of how I describe it for me.
It is the actual wrestling itself is real. The storylines, you can argue, are scripted or whatever, but you can't say that guy jumping from the top rope, flipping 3 times in the air and smashing the other guy is fake, because that's real.
I mean, gravity is real.
Yeah. And I know my screen might be going weird. I'm trying to look for something here, so I'm just going to turn it off for a second, but continue. But that's sort of where I started. But Malik, what about you?
And similar to what Pat said, I was very drawn to the characters, and I remember very vividly the exact first time I watched wrestling. It was a Saturday night, maybe afternoon. I was in my playroom. So I was probably 5, 6, 7 years old at the time. And I was flipping through the channels, and I don't remember what channel it was on particularly, but I remember this screen, and there was this gate that opened, and the smoke was emerging through it. And this character came out, and I was like, wow, what is this? Little did I know it was WCW Saturday Night. But that's kind of what got me hooked on it. And that started me on the journey of renting movies from Blockbuster, and shout out to Millwood's Video back in the day that also had videos. But and that was kind of my introduction to wrestling. And for me, similar to what Patuan said, it was the character. So for me, it was the elaborate show, the bright colors, the aesthetics, the Ultimo Dragons, the Doink
theme
the
music.
Clowns. Yeah,
Oh,
it was all of that, and that's what drew me in. And then from there, I started growing and learning and watching. Like, I remember, and I'll get into it when I get to my Mount Rushmore, but the Royal Rumble 1994 VHS, I rented that from Blockbuster probably at least once a month, and I would watch it like regularly. And I remember growing up, it was just like, yeah, wrestling's a thing. That's just one of my hobbies. I like hockey, I like wrestling. But for me, it was that moment as a kid in my playroom, seeing that on my TV and just seeing like, whoa, this is pretty spooky. This is pretty cool. What is this? And it was, for me, it was the aesthetic part that drew me in, and then the rest, as they say, is
Larger than
history.
life, baby.
Yeah, the larger than life characters drew me in.
And then some of the weird things that we used to see on there too, like
Oh, dude,
Oh,
that's my
lots of
favorite.
those things.
like
Lots
Giant
of those things.
Gonzalez's suit and just things like that.
Like
Papa
a
Shango, man.
hand being born.
Or
Yeah.
somebody talking to a head sometimes, but
There's
Yeah.
a lot of weird twisted
Or-
things too that were kind of like, why are kids allowed to watch this now that we look
Or
back
like a
at it?
choppy or something, you know.
something.
Yeah.
Mr. Socko.
Yeah,
That was just awesome.
Yeah.
but the and I think the interesting part is that it spans so many years. Like, but the one talked about, he's a little bit older than us, and he grew up in a different era of wrestling, so he
Yeah.
saw more of the cartoony style wrestling. But even in my experience, I went back, even Cushy's experience, he went back and watched that, and like, no, it's still the same thing. Attitude Era, arguably the most mainstream, the most peak of wrestling, and now
Yeah.
it's not as popular. It's kind of a niche, but they still sell out huge stadiums. So I mean, it's still as popular as
The
always.
fans are still there. Like
It's
they're
popular.
just
It's
not as,
just like it's not in traditional
Yeah.
mediums of watching TV, anyways. So it's hard. Like, and then wrestling's such like a global phenomenon too now.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess we'll jump into the Mount Rushmore at this point. And I
want to
think
explain
probably the
what it
best-
is.
Yeah. So the best way to do it also is just we'll go one at a time. One person at a time. We each get a turn to defend or talk about. And like I said at the start of the show, it's pretty objective. Everybody had their own experience, different eras we grew up in. So Mount Rushmore, for those that don't know, is a monument, a mountain in the States that has.
I like how we're actually explaining what Mount Rushmore is.
You know, hey, you don't know. I
Some
mean,
people
we might
don't know
have
what
to-
it is.
That's true. I
We
guess.
might have to explain what VHS tapes are too.
Yeah, because I think we're outdated at this point, right?
So
Yeah.
it's a mountain with 4 presidents' faces on it. So essentially,
That was
we're gonna
stolen
go-
from the indigenous communities, by the way. But yeah, go
Yeah.
on.
So we're going to talk about our top 4 wrestlers. We're also going to throw in maybe a female as our 5th, and maybe an honorable mention or two, like we always do. For me, this was the hardest thing I've done in a very long time. I'm
Yeah,
like,
it's
oh, I
hard.
like
It's hard
this
to pick.
wrestler. I like this one too. But I'm like, I could have easily picked everybody from the Attitude Era. But I'm like, I mean, there's a lot of things that I watched, a lot of wrestling. So, shall we start?
Let's do
Yeah.
it.
I'll go first. For my first one, this was an easy pick for me. The first person I want to
Hogan. No, I'm just kidding.
no, that's somebody else on the screen. But for me, my number one's
For
got to
sure.
be Rey Mysterio.
Rey Mysterio.
And I think for me, it was, I mean, with the wrestling aspect, everybody talks about his 97 Halloween Havoc match with Eddie Guerrero, but also just being such a small human in a world of giants.
Yeah.
He was able to popularize, and arguably, no disrespect to like Mil Mascaras and El Santo and all those guys, but probably the most popular, most famous luchador ever. He kind of made Mexican wrestling known, lucha libre style known in the US and Canada, and popularized it. And then, as I talked about earlier, his aesthetic, his gear is always unreal. Like, he'll pull from pop culture, he'll whatever is popular at the time, and his mask is iconic. Like, you see that, you're like, yeah, that's Rey Mysterio. So
Yeah, and it changes every match.
yeah, exactly. So for me, and even now, he's still going, and he's still not terrible. So
He still wrestles on. He's back in WWE. The cool thing about Ray for me is that so like before he hit WWE, he was WCW and he was the ECW for a bit.
Yeah.
And then like he had his run in WWE, really good run. People became in love with him. He had a true underdog story, like where he won the Royal Rumble, being the number one entrant. That's like. WWE, they do that storyline a bit, but like when you're a guy like Rey Mysterio, who's like so small and stuff, you're not expected to win or outlast like the 29 other dudes, or sometimes girls. It's really such a great story. And then he leaves. He has like a great legacy. He's a champion there, a top champion. And then he takes some time off, and then he does some wicked kind of project with Lucha Underground. So no, I don't think too many people are gonna know what Lucha Underground is, but it was like a TV series, like it was pre-recorded in like a warehouse in California. On the El Rey network, and they made it kind of like almost like one of those like 911 shows where like they have like behind the scenes detective stuff or whatever. Like their promos were just like they were all like Hollywoodized, right?
Yeah. That's a good way to put it.
And it was so cool how they did that whole show, and then he did some crazy stuff in there. Like that show reignited some love for wrestling for me too. And then he was doing the independents. He was doing well, and then he came back kind of full circle to WWE. He's killing it. Like he kind of put some other wrestlers on the map too, like Andrade. He had some absolutely stellar matches with that guy, and kind of helped make him and his name as well, who was another big luchador.
Yeah.
So that's transcends a lot of things.
Yeah. And I think for me, that was my easy number one pick. The rest were a lot harder for me, but Rey Mysterio is going to be the first one on my mountain.
It's a great pick.
Yeah, I like Rey Mysterio too. He's very dynamic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kush, who's your number one or first on your mount?
First on the Mount Rushmore? Well, guys, this is an Attitude Era special, and sometimes he asks, what does everybody want? Sometimes he asks, what does everybody need? And we say,
Wow.
I'm referencing Al Snow, if you couldn't tell there.
You have to remember this is an audio podcast as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So definitely realize that I'm holding a mannequin head in my hand, and I'm holding it up to my webcam so that.
And what does it say on the forehead?
It says exactly what it says on Al Snow's mannequin head. Help me. And so, anyways, that's not my pick, but I just wanted to do a little funny. And there that was. So I think number one for me, I'm kind of like going, I think, one per era. And so I'll just do, like, it's Bret Hart, number one. We already touched on, like, his impact on us as Canadian kids, especially Albertan kids. Like, you had this guy who is considered the best wrestler in the world by almost everyone, his peers, fans, his promotion. And he is putting on these, like, insanely good matches, like, always. Like, all his matches are high quality, and he's not just like a one-trick kind of pony. Like, when he's in a match, he's doing everything. His execution is incredible. His ability to tell a story, which is like wrestling terminology, but like telling a story, like, is like when you have like a storyline going and you have this feud or something. Say somebody attacks the legs, like in the first couple weeks, like he'll, like 5 weeks down the line, he'll bring that into his matches where it's like, oh, my leg's injured because this guy attacked me back then. Like, and those subtle things like make all the difference in like you believing in wrestling versus you not, which is what a lot of the modern day wrestling gets a knock on, because they kind of sometimes don't ignore those subtleties, yeah. Right? That kind of made it real per se. And like, then, you know, his promo wasn't anything spectacular, but he was very cool guy. You know, he came out with the shades,
yeah.
Put it on the kid.
Everybody wanted to be the kid that got the sunglasses.
Yeah, man.
I remember as a kid, I would take like when you got new dress shirts, they had those little like collar ties in them. I would
Yeah.
like take those out and like put them on as sunglasses as a little kid.
Yeah. Yeah. Like he was essentially
Yeah.
like a Canadian hero if you grew up in like Canada kind of watching WWF. Like that's how I would equate him. And arguably the
Also,
best
yeah.
technician of all time.
Also, again, a smaller person in the land of giants. Like the time he started coming up,
Yeah.
those
He
bigger guys were
wasn't,
fading away, but he was in that time.
yeah, he wasn't like 6'5", 6'7". He wasn't he didn't have that steroid needle too far injected, you know, the veins, the body size was, you know, pretty normal for a human being. So you know, and he says it all the time. He prides himself on never really majorly injuring anyone in the ring, and he never really did. So best there is, best there was, and best there ever will be.
And with that,
Right.
Batuan, who's your first?
Well, I'm not going to go in any appeasing order for you guys, and I'm not going to do the typical one that you're expecting out of me at the beginning.
Don't worry, don't worry, we're ready for it. We are ready for it.
Yeah, okay. So my first pick on the Mount Rushmore of wrestling, and the reason I'm picking him first, and it is a he, is because of what this guy did to the industry by being who he is, and the iconic matches that he was a part of. And then sort of the transition of the typical wrestling into the sort of, you know, wow, like, are you really going to do that? Is that something I even want to watch? And this
That's
all
one of my picks,
changed.
too.
Like, what's that?
I said that's one of my picks as well. I already know where you're going, but anyways, continue.
Yeah, so I saw him live, and I think me and you went, Kush, to this match, and it was a little while ago. But I saw him live. I went to maybe 2 or 3 wrestling matches in Edmonton, obviously. And we'll talk about the earliest one a while ago. I went with my dad. My dad took me. But this one is Mankind. Mick Foley.
I think we've all seen him live at some point.
Okay, I thought incorrect. But anyways,
okay.
Very solid pick.
Mick Foley is my number one on my Mount Rushmore, which is stolen by from the indigenous people. And I'll keep saying that because it's true. But the thing is,
many other things that was stolen from them.
well, I mean, this all has been stolen from them. But the thing is, Mick Foley, because I used to watch wrestling. I grew up in the 80s watching the 80s wrestling, which was the very colorful American wrestling, right? And being an Albertan, you really related to that American wrestling, right? So Mick Foley comes in as Mankind and has these iconic matchups, being the bad guy to Undertaker at that time, who was more, I wouldn't say good guy, bad guy, but those matchups were insane. Then they teamed up, and then Kane came into the picture, and then that's when wrestling started, not just because of that, but that's when wrestling started morphing into what it, I guess you can argue, has become today. Yeah. And that's when it took a turn. Like people like Undertaker came in and changed it, of course, when they did come in the late 80s. But Mankind, what he did with those hardcore matches, and that's what I remember watching live. And when I saw it live, I was just blown away.
And I think, yeah, that's a great pick. And we've talked about it, like Spider-Man and other episodes, the Everyman, right?
Yeah.
I think Mankind, even before WWE, like his background story is unreal. If you have a chance, A&E just did a biography on him. It is really good to watch. But even his matches in Japan, like his hardcore matches, and Kush, you know, I'm all about those death matches, but the stuff he put his body through just because he felt that he wasn't that muscular man. Even Vince McMahon, when he brought him on, he's like, I don't see appeal in him. I'm just going to put a mask on him. But he turned into one of, I would say, a very good wrestler, one of the greatest of all time. And when they put the title on him, WCW wanted to spoil that and ruin that, but it became one of the highest watched segments, even though it was a tape show.
It became their downfall. And if I did not mention his Hell in a Cell match with Undertaker, that would be a great disservice to his commitment to wrestling. Like, if no one knows what I'm referencing, you need to Google or YouTube Undertaker versus Mankind Hell in a Cell and watch what happens to him, because it like physically it makes
doesn't make sense.
no sense at all, and he did that because his love of the wrestling, like it's
love of
I
the
don't
sport,
understand.
even though people don't call it a sport. To be
Sports entertainment, baby.
It's the actual wrestling is still a sport, and then the entertainment side of it's the part that's
it's athletics and soap opera.
So I mean, that's my
solid,
number one
solid
guy.
pick. And I'm gonna piggyback off of that.
Oh, and Mr. Socko, of course. Like that's like everyone's
and,
favorite thing to do is put their sock in somebody else's mouth.
But even then, you got Mick Foley, Cactus Jack, Mankind, Dude Love, everything he did.
Multiple personalities. He did quite a few different runs. Champion a few times. One really great tag team with The Rock. Yeah, like he's done a lot of different things. Came back as a general manager. He's done a lot of different things. He's actually had an incredible career.
So I'm gonna piggyback off of that for my second one on my mountain, and I'm gonna go with The Undertaker. The reason being is, again, similar to what Patuan said at the start, it was the character thing. Debuting in 1990 as The Undertaker, as the Attitude Era came upon him, he morphed into the Ministry of Darkness, and I think that for me was one of the coolest Undertaker versions, was the Ministry of Darkness. But
that was interesting.
I referred to, the 1994 Royal Rumble DVD, or sorry, VHS. I'm going back to that. I was a big Yokozuna fan growing up. So the matchup was Undertaker versus Yokozuna in a casket match. And I was probably 6 or 7, maybe 8 at the time.
I remember
watching
this followed.
So Yokozuna wins the match. Undertaker's in the casket, and all of a sudden, lightning strikes, and there's like Undertaker on the screen. I was scared the crap out of me. I was so scared for the longest time of the Undertaker just because of that. And I knew it wasn't real. It's a character, but like inducing that emotion, that fear. I think the Undertaker as a character was iconic.
Yeah,
he
was going to be one of my picks too, but I knew one of you guys would have taken him before me.
But I mean, he could still be on your mountain.
Yeah,
I know it's not a draft, but
like arguably the greatest entrance of all time.
Everybody knows the gong. Yeah,
the gong. You hear the gong, and then
the best is when he used to
literally
come on
get the chills. Like you literally get the chills. I've gotten the chills.
Maybe not the last few years of his career, but
on the motorcycle.
I honestly, even the last few times of his career, like everyone wanted him to retire because his match quality, like you could just tell, physically he hit a block, and but like still hearing that gong, even I knew of his inability to kind of wrestle because he hit that age kind of limitation. Like I still would feel it. I'll be like, oh man, Undertaker's coming.
Honestly, that's probably one thing I regret, never seeing it live. Because I can imagine in an arena, like that would have been
that'd be really crazy.
Yeah. Because I'm gonna go back to, me and Kush, we try to go to every wrestling show possible. I remember I'm pretty sure we saw Bret Hart live, and the music hitting, we're like, we just lost our mind.
Yeah. Like he was in a promo with McMahon. Which he shouldn't have been, but it was. They had a match. But anyways, exactly. Do you hear somebody like that iconic
entrance music, and I think it goes back to what I talked about, aesthetics, right? It's like the character, the music, the wardrobe, all coming together. And I think for Undertaker is the ability to adapt. We all remember his Survivor Series debut with his long socks. Then he slowly evolved into something different, the Ministry of Darkness. Then he became the Biker Taker. Yeah. And then he went back to like his regular Undertaker version. But all versions of the Undertaker were like, no, that's pretty sick.
Yeah.
So that's my number 2.
Cool. Okay. I will give my number 2, and it is The Rock. And The Rock is the most electrifying man in all of sports entertainment. So like with The Rock, his story is pretty interesting because failed kind of football player.
Calgary Stampeder.
Failed football player, which is interesting because a lot of Samoans seem to go that road. Obviously his nephew.
Arguably failed as a wrestler starting off until he found his footing.
Yes, and then so like his first kind of gimmick, which I liked because I was like, oh, that's a cool name.
He's
So
such a happy guy.
Yeah, Rocky Maivia, and then him getting chants of "Die, Rocky, die!" Like, because the fans hated him so much.
What was that group he was in? He was.
Then he
Nation of
joined the
Domination.
Nation of Domination.
That's it.
And that's when he started to come into his own.
Like
because
Ron Simmons,
personality.
Farouk.
yeah, you had
Yeah, Farouk.
there, Mark
Yeah.
Henry, you had D'Lo Brown, and you had how come I can't? Or Godfather?
Come
I don't
on,
remember his
yeah.
own name.
Yeah.
He was Kama
What's
Mustafa.
his actual name?
Was it? Oh, the Godfather,
Yeah,
Papa Shango,
yeah. What's
Kama
his
the Fighting Machine, Charles Wright.
Okay,
That's
anyways,
it.
so the Godfather. So anyway, so they had like that faction, which was a cool faction in itself,
Yeah.
obviously. The group of obviously got a little bit of a political thing too, and then so he becomes Intercontinental Champion there. He has a great run, and then the fans start. He changes his character because the fans hate him, and then he starts playing on that side of also giving it back to the fans, becoming a heel or a bad guy. And then his promos start coming, his ability to talk on the microphone and insult folks, and his one-liners, everything starts developing slowly and slowly. And this guy separates himself from the Nation of Domination crew. He exits that group and becomes a standalone character, and is, in my opinion, the most entertaining guy ever to touch a microphone in WWE history.
Yeah, and look at him now, right? Like he's arguably the most sought after actor in Hollywood
in
too.
the world. Yeah.
So I want, like, that's the issue I had. I'm like, I could just put all Attitude Era guys on my mountain, but The Rock is definitely,
yeah.
If you talk about greatest of all times, The Rock is definitely on that list.
Yeah, because for me, growing up, I get everyone's appeal with Steve Austin versus Rock. I get the argument, and I understand Steve Austin's side. Because as I'm older, I see Steve Austin's side way more now. Because you're just like, oh man, I F these people, F the workplace, that kind of stuff. But The Rock, he drew you in. His everything was just so freaking funny. Anytime he picked up a mic, I knew I was gonna laugh. He no matter what his situation he was in, he would make me laugh.
And he could back it up as a wrestler too.
Yes, he was a really solid wrestler. And yeah, man, I don't know.
Giant calves like you. That's why he had to cut them on his boots.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it, man. That's my pick.
Yeah.
The Brahma Bull. Remember that?
Yeah, that was iconic for sure. All right, Pat, who do you have for your number two?
I'm just gonna piggyback and take The Rock as well, because I can't not take The Rock. Because, and I'll give my two. I mean, Kushi said it pretty solidly there. But for me, when I look at wrestling, and if you're gonna make a Mount Rushmore of wrestlers, like 4 wrestlers on there, Mick Foley for obviously reasons that I picked, but then The Rock can't not be on there, because the thing with The Rock is he was so dynamic. He took wrestling in a time where it was sort of stale. Wasn't fully stale, not to like diehard fans, but to like fans that would just watch, right?
Yeah,
and not be sort of obligated. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he took what WWE was at that time, similar to somebody else who did it in the 80s, and he took it and made it really hype. And the thing with this Attitude Era is, everybody's wearing black, right? Everybody's wearing black. Stone Cold is wearing black.
He shows up with the most obnoxious button-up shirts.
Yeah, and he used to do all that. He had all that going on. It was just like, what the heck is he doing? When he was more the Rocky Maivia, and then he went from Rocky to Rock and The Rock, right? And so when he kind of had that Rock vibe, with the people's elbow, the people's eyebrow, the people's champion, when he was in that era, mainstream is what wrestling became, and everybody knew who The Rock was.
Now I regret not putting him on my mountain, but
you can still put him on your
mountain. His connection with the fans was like one of the best.
You mentioned the eyebrow. You mentioned the eyebrow. How many of us stood in front of the mirror?
Everyone tried the people's eyebrow.
Everybody tried to do it.
Everyone. Right? And so everyone was like, know your role. Your Rudy Poo Candy. Everyone was saying it doesn't matter. Like everyone did. This guy was like a cultural icon.
Yeah. And I remember watching him with my family right? You, Kushi included.
Yeah.
And like even my parents or like my cousins would be over from Vancouver and like my mama and mommy, everybody. And they're all glued to the TV when The Rock is on. My dad too. And they're all glued to the TV just watching. And there's like, holy crap. And then he starts doing, and that's when those Vince McMahon, Stone Cold Rock type of storylines took place, where the ambulance is driving off and a semi truck hits and that was so entertaining. And The Rock was sort of, I feel like he was, and Stone Cold was very important in this era as
don't worry,
well.
that's gonna be my next pick. So it's
okay. Don't worry, we'll talk about Stone Cold in a minute. And I'm not picking Stone Cold for a reason.
Yeah.
But he is in my honorable mentions. I'll just say it now, whatever, spoiler alert. But the
And
point is that like The Rock was like, holy crap, like this, I want to watch this, even if I don't care about the wrestling side of it. So there's people that would not even watch wrestling for the wrestling. They'd watch it for The Rock's entertainment. And I think the transition from WWF to WWE is really, I guess, if you want to put a face on the entertainment, The Rock is the first thing that comes to mind for me in the modern era of wrestling.
Yeah, and then like the other cool thing about Rocky is like, even after that whole run where he became the people's champion, he came back after he shot like a scorpion or whatever, and he came back as Hollywood Rock, redid his character and became a complete jackass. And it worked. Everyone hated him. Like he did such a great job, and he was so entertaining. He was going on the mic. He had to filter
himself out now.
Well, the thing is, he'd come out with his guitar, sit in the middle of the ring on the stool, sing a song, and just rip cities apart. So great, man. Honestly, like he knew what it took to make like the fans like
to get their reactions. Doesn't matter if it was good or bad. Yeah.
So my pick, and I'm gonna piggyback off of reactions, because when you heard this wrestler's theme song, you knew the moment the glass shattered that crap was about to hit the fan. I may not have necessarily resonated with his lifestyle choices, but I think the impact that Stone Cold Steve Austin had on making wrestling mainstream, similar to what The Rock did, was huge.
Making wrestling great again.
Not only that, but in ring, after breaking his neck, he was still able to adapt, become that brawler style of wrestler, but also still be just a complete badass doing it. And I think one of the biggest things is we see a lot in wrestling that storylines are recycled.
And he had great accompaniment to the ring sometimes.
Yeah. And so a lot of characters are recycled. A lot of people are recycled. But I think the Stone Cold versus Vince McMahon, the man versus the boss, they've tried to do it so many times, but nobody comes even close to the level that Stone Cold was doing it. And I think that was iconic in itself. Like they tried to do it with Triple H and the Authority, but it didn't work. Yeah. But when Austin did it with Vince in the Attitude Era, and then you have Vince McMahon coming out as completely jacked, like it was just ridiculous.
That's arguably the greatest feud of all time is Vince McMahon versus Stone Cold Steve Austin.
The greatest example of steroid use of all time is also Vince McMahon.
But,
that guy's a freak. He hits the gym every day.
He hits the gym every morning, 5 a.m. still. Yeah. So I think for me, Stone Cold, just his longevity too. Like we talked about how the Undertaker didn't have those good years for the past few years. Mm-hmm. Stone Cold didn't he left in his peak.
Yeah, that obviously wasn't by choice.
Like we didn't get enough of him, but if you know what I mean. And
that's actually like a good thing, though, I think, because as we saw, like in Undertaker's case,
it was too long. We're like, all right,
you got like going.
You're like, okay, like we need to
even in Mick Foley, Mick Foley's case too. He even regrets it. Like he talks in interviews, like, I should have stopped at a certain point. But like Stone Cold left, and credit to him, he didn't come back.
Yeah, because he's been asked so many times, and he's like, no, there's nothing to come back to. Like, look at what I've done. And he's right when he says that, because like he is maybe the most impactful wrestler for like people, for like young adult males, honestly, or just people like in the workplace.
Yeah, and for me, seeing him pull up in whatever vehicle he was driving. So he would drive a Zamboni, drive ATV. But for me, it's that beer truck. That beer truck was hilarious. Yeah. And Kurt Angle did it to another extent with the milk, which is even funnier. Yeah. But that was sick at that time. Shooting people with beer, like that was unreal. So my pick is Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Stone Cold. Yeah, and like he's just one of the most badass people. Like you said, when the music hits, it's just like
you go back and watch those videos, you see the crowd just absolutely go crazy.
Everyone just loses it. And then the other thing, like with Austin is he also adapted his character. People didn't like it though when he turned into a heel and he went bad guy. And then he partnered with the Triple H, but he did some of his funniest stuff at that time. Yeah. Like honestly, it was so stupid. It was like very juvenile, but it was hilarious.
But we talk about promos. I think Steve Austin, although he wore black trunks and wasn't aesthetically the coolest looking guy besides his gold chain and his goatee, but his promos, next level. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I think it's anniversary of him cutting the promo of Austin 316 today. But it's like everybody knows that. Everybody knows Austin 316. Everybody knows the what chants that still go when you go to wrestling chants.
What we do
it?
Yeah. We do it for fun. Like it's Right.
Even Skeletor does it.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Pick. Kush, who's your? Are we on?
My number three. My number three. So I will go 2010 era, and this one is super hard because I'm wearing the symbol of one of who I want to pick, and then the other guy is his counterpart, who is also very dearly loved, more loved for sure. So I think you already know who I'm talking about, Malik.
It's a solid pick, very solid pick.
Yeah, so like when you compare those two, it's like I feel like I only want to take one of those two, not both. But I will go with Daniel Bryan, the American Dragon, as my pick. Because I think Daniel Bryan and I'm obviously referring to CM Punk as the other guy I was thinking about. Like they had a very similar path in that they did independence. They
weren't cookie cutter wrestlers.
Yeah, very small guys, not jacked, don't have that build, but they're both great wrestlers. But CM Punk was a way more of a personality, I'd say. But that also got him in a lot of trouble. So like with Daniel Bryan, like he was an incredible wrestler before he came to WWE. He spent a lot of time on the Indies, ROH, namely, and also in New Japan, but like in Noah, Pro Wrestling Noah over there and stuff. So like he did a lot of tours in Japan, fighting the best wrestlers over there. Had a similar style, took some moves from another fellow great named Kenta, and yeah, like always his story was a classic underdog, right? So like, and this is where I absolutely lost it for him, like at this time. So just after like Punk had his summer of Punk, Daniel Bryan was coming into his own. But the thing with Daniel Bryan is he didn't have too much problems with like management and stuff. Like he didn't get he didn't get up in their face and always tell them to F off, those kind of things. Like he worked with it and then he kind of made it work. Or managed it rather. So like
arguably he forced the hand of management to give him the title because the crowds were so behind him.
Yep.
Like the crowd, like management didn't want to push him.
Yeah.
But he didn't complain about it. He's like, all right, cool, I'll just keep doing my thing.
Yes, exactly.
And they just gave in.
So rather than like doing it on a promo like Punk would do, and Punk is probably my favorite promo ever, but like rather than doing it like that, what he did is first he got into putting a tagging with Kane, and everyone was like, "What the hell?"
Turned to gold though.
But that was one of the best tag team stuff I've ever seen. He made it like he played on the dynamic of a small guy and big guy so well, them becoming like best friends. That's when his no chance started, and the yes chants were kind of going. Which he made really popular, which he stole from Diego Sanchez or something. But either way, like he popularized the chants, which is still a phenomenon to this day in the sporting realm. And then they hugged it out, and it was a great story. Then he transitions into the Authority storyline that you were referencing earlier, and how you were saying no one has done it well. Well, he's the only guy who has done it well.
Yeah, but I feel like that's it. And compared to Austin's story, that was like a different way of doing the same thing.
Yeah,
Austin was like in your face. I'm giving you the middle finger, whereas D-Bry was like, all right, I'm gonna outwork you. I'm gonna
he outsmarted too, because with Daniel Bryan, like he wasn't, like you said, he's not Austin. He wasn't up in your face demanding things, but he reached a breaking point where it's like the fans, every fan was cheering this for this guy, like absolutely nuts. Every show. But like my favorite episode of his was the Occupy Raw, which was playing on the Occupy Wall Street stuff. But he brought in all the fans from the crowd to come into the ring, and they took over Raw. They all put on his shirts, took over Raw. None of them would leave until he got his shot at WrestleMania. And that's my favorite segment of his probably ever. Like, it was so well done, and it was such great storytelling that he took over the show, took it hostage that Triple H had to give him a match. Yeah. And then he, that match is just to get an opportunity at the main event of WrestleMania, so that match goes so long, he wins that match. Then he's in the triple threat match with one of the two of the greatest wrestlers, Batista and Randy Orton, in WrestleMania 30. Big stage, obviously. Yeah. And then, defies all odds, wins that match, and then boom, confetti, everything, like just one of the greatest winning moments in WrestleMania moments, right? And
I think for me, those underdog WrestleMania moments, Daniel Bryan comes to mind, Eddie Guerrero comes to mind, Chris Benoit comes to mind, like those underdog stories. And I think Daniel Bryan was like the modern era version of that's why story.
That's why it hit home way more for me, because like I literally remember Benoit and Eddie Guerrero hugging it out in the middle of the ring, WrestleMania 20, right? And then we went to those shows after, like that, when they came to Edmonton and Benoit was champ. So like those felt good, and this felt just like that, and kind of like in that same vein. And then then he gets the career-ending injury, right? And then everyone's like shocked. They're like, oh, wow, right?
But then he comes back as the Eco Warrior. Like that was
he fights back, comes back as the one of the funniest gimmicks. Like so, it's actually so clever, because everything he's saying is like a baby face would, like you would expect him to get that reaction.
But everybody's just like, no.
Yeah, but everyone hates him because he's being like that stuck up prick, and it works so well. And then he pays it forward. That's the thing. Like, definitely my favorite WrestleMania moment in like the last 5 years was Kofi Kingston winning, without a 100%. Doubt. Maybe the most important WrestleMania moment ever. And he played on it so well. He reversed the tables essentially on Kofi, saying, "Oh, Kofi, you're the B+ player. You're the guy who's never gonna make it, right?" So everything he faced during his rise to the top, he put that on Kofi and played it so well. And then he did the job. And he's still going today. He's still a great wrestler, and he's talking about wanting to wrestle other places. So we'll see what happens with him.
Yeah. All right, Pat, you're up next.
All right. So here is another one. Like so I'm battling because I don't know. It's so hard to pick four, but
it's impossible. Mine's changing as we're talking.
I know. Like I'm getting ideas, hearing stories and shit. Right. I think I'm gonna have to go with. There's so many antagonists in WWE, and I already kind of picked one that was and wasn't Mankind, right? Or Mick Foley. I was thinking of Rick Rude for a second. But there's another guy, so he's still relevant today in a lot of different ways, but he was sort of the iconic bad guy in the early 80s, middle of the 80s, and he had many different enemies that were protagonists or good guys, and so I'm gonna go with the Iron Sheik on this one. And
come on, that's gonna make me. I want to just do so many promos now.
Honestly, though, as a character, like such a strong character, played up exactly what he needed to do as the foil to the good guys.
Yeah,
and
super traditional like heel character, bad guy character, right?
And I remember
he had so many fun names too. Like one was like Colonel Mustafa or something like that. Yeah, he's from the 70s, but I mean he was very
classic bad guy. Classic bad guy.
Yeah,
for sure. All All right, for my number 4, I'm going to go completely off the
Wait,
board.
that's it?
Uh,
Are we not going to cut any promos? Aren't you?
No, we
I'm just
got to
kidding.
talk about
All right,
it.
No,
go
no,
ahead,
we
go
can't.
ahead,
We
go
can't because then we have to all his promos, especially in pertaining to Hulk Hogan,
are wonderful. You should look them up.
Yeah, actually, so I do want to shout out his Twitter, 18 plus for sure.
Yeah.
But reading his tweets in the morning just make me absolutely laugh.
And that's why I said he's relevant today because of Twitter.
Yeah. No, honestly though, I think arguably one of the greatest heels of all time, one of the greatest bad guys of all time.
100%, man.
Iron Sheik.
Like,
Yeah, and he was
especially
the
for that
champion.
generation.
Yeah.
And he was the champion for a little while.
Yeah.
And that's the cool thing.
I think he is a great character. So
Yeah, I mean,
my number 4, I'm going completely off the board here. I'll probably move the one.
is that number
I
4 or
had.
is that number 3?
That's your 3, so my 4.
Oh yeah, you're starting. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go with a character or a wrestler that was more of a what if, because he passed away at a very early age. So my pick is gonna be Owen Hart. And the reason being is he passed in 99, right before WWE or WWF at the time bought WCW. WCW had people like Rey Mysterio, Chris Benoit, Dean Malenko. Like, you imagine the matches that Owen Hart would have had against those guys in that era where they needed a person.
It's interesting you said that because you could think the same of Brett, because obviously Brett's career got ended early due to injury as well. I mean, Owen obviously lost his life, very tragic, but Owen was regarded. Some people say, like a lot of people say, Owen was a better wrestler.
Yeah, and for me, like when I think of iconic matches, I think of that Brett versus Owen feud from WrestleMania. I still think that brother versus brother match was like one of the best matches put together.
And they were backed for a little while by their other family members.
Yeah,
so some sided with Owen and some sided with
the whole Hart family, right?
Well, and then after that, they became the Hart Foundation, and they had like their whole crew, which was all their family. It was like Jim the Anvil Neidhart and all these other guys, and it was crazy, man.
And I think, and the reason I brought Owen Hart up is because Kush talked about Daniel Bryan. When we think of that classic high-flying, high-impact style of wrestling, Owen Hart was one of the only ones doing it in that time. Yeah. Before him, obviously, he was influenced by like Dynamite Kid, who had his
one other guy that I struggled that I picked Iron Sheik over. Yeah, that I'll give a shout out to, but continue.
Yeah, so Dynamite Kid had a lot of demons, but Owen Hart, very similar style of wrestling, very high impact, very similar to what Daniel Bryan is doing now. But he had that clean background. So Owen Hart for me is going to be my 4th, a little bit off the board, but he was definitely definitely.
I'm not going to complain about that. Yeah,
as a heel as well, like the whiny little brother was great.
Him joining Nation of Domination,
and his mouth used to be like,
"I'm not a nugget." Like those are classic stuff.
Enough is enough. It's time for a change.
All right, that's my number 4. Kush.
Very good.
Oh, dude, last one, eh? So,
there's still honorable mentions, but yeah, your last for the mountain.
Yeah, well, we do. You know what, man? I'm gonna pick my female now, because she is so freaking good. I think she has like the package, the whole total package.
Because she's related to these guys that we're talking about.
No.
Oh, okay.
No. This
not
is
Natalia.
This is not Natalia. No.
Okay.
Natalia's boring, my friend. She's good. She's a great wrestler. Amazing wrestler.
Real wrestler. She's
amazing wrestler, but I'm not into her character in promo at all. But this is somebody who wrestles really well alongside her, is a modern wrestler who's part of the 4 Horsewomen of WWE, and it's Sasha Banks. I think she is the best women's wrestler. She's maybe, like, women or men aside, like, she's one of the best wrestlers to date. Her ability to have such great matches with, doesn't matter who she's put in with, it's unreal how well she can work with the whole roster. She had incredible, like, very notable feuds already, like legendary feuds with Charlotte, of course, with Bayley. So plus, like, when I say the 4 Horsewomen, that's a new saying, right? So she's one of the people who built NXT's brand. And if you follow wrestling now, NXT is like regarded as like the wrestlers wrestling, because Triple H keeps that whole ship kind of run really purely, right? Even though it's associated with WWE, it's really a different product than what you get with Raw or SmackDown or any pay-per-view for the WWE. So, like, I think her moveset's incredible. She's great, super entertaining on the mic, and I just think she's had some of the best matches I've seen from a female. So, just some of the best matches I've seen. Period. Like, she's just so great. So, and her outfits.
You're gonna hear no arguments from me. So
yeah, her outfit is always on point. Like, and so her husband makes all her outfits. So like that guy's killing it. Yeah, Sasha Banks, man, put her up there.
All right, Pat.
Number 4.
Numero 4.
All right, well, there you go. My number 4 pick is the one and only Terry Hulk Hogan. That's his real name, Terry.
Terry.
Exactly. So the thing is, Hulk Hogan is, I mean, yeah, sure. There's a lot of things about Hulk Hogan in his personal life, right? And I'm not, you know, looking at that to kind of gauge my pick of him as a wrestler, because, you know, as a wrestler, he was sort of, I would argue, definitely my first, when I was referencing me watching wrestling and noticing these characters and their theme music, this guy's the whole package, right? I don't know which side to point on, but there he is. And for me as a kid growing up, seeing Hulk Hogan, that was really like, wow, like this guy, he captured me right away. Eating your vitamins every day, all his sayings,
as a character, definitely.
Pray, you know, and like ripping his shirt, like it was so iconic, man.
Arguably at the time, like he was the one that brought wrestling to mainstream. Like you talk about Rock and
that's
wrestling.
what I'm saying. And before The Rock, I think he was the most entertaining wrestler, especially for the 80s and what wrestling was in the 80s.
Yeah, he's the icon of, he's still arguably the face of wrestling.
And a lot of people would argue it's the Ultimate Warrior, but I would argue against it with Hulk Hogan.
I don't think people would argue it's Ultimate Warrior because like Hulk Hogan was everywhere, movies, everything. Like even to this day, you say his name, everyone knows. Like, oh yeah, he's that famous wrestler, right?
Yeah, and the thing is, like, the way, if you had to pick the face of WWF before it was WWE, I would say, and this is sort of like Hulk, the 70s, Hogan, 80s, it's Hulk Hogan.
Up there.
After that, maybe The Rock, right? Or like some other character.
And I'm not a fan of Hulk Hogan at all, and I won't knock him down too much. But even when he became like Hollywood Hulk Hogan, that character adaptation was
awesome,
right?
That's
like
one of the biggest
classic,
heel turns, bad guy formulation of a group ever, right? And it's one of the most iconic groups to this day, and people try to emulate it and they can't.
Nope.
Hulk Hogan was sort of what made that group, you know, he completed what they were. And they definitely were cool, but he joined them and then they're like, oh man. Then they went on a rampage.
Well, he took it over the edge, right? Because like no
that's what I mean.
No one ever expected him. Their like whole hero of life to turn
the American hero to become the American.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. Like, so he epitomized what it meant to be like the American dream, American hero, like big strong guy, right? Like, so like he just symbolized that for everyone, right?
Yeah.
And then that's why so many kids, especially like in the 80s, you know, like patriotism's pretty strong. You know, during
Gulf
those times,
War was happening then too. So
war, and like, you know, you have somebody to look up to who's on your national television, who's like this big giant dude. What's not to love, right?
Yeah, as a character, I'd say good. As a human being, I would have many faults to
I wouldn't say bad as a human being.
But like, you know, you could say that about different of our wrestlers. So like, I don't even want to like touch that.
You know, so we're talking about the wrestlers, not people, character. Right? So at the same time,
even behind the curtain, like
there's
a lot of stories
political
about
stuff. Sure.
Like he was like the king of politicking and always going over. So I feel like even in that sense, although he was a huge part of making wrestling mainstream in the 80s and bringing it to the forefront, he's still kind of a jerk.
Very
That's
selfish
me.
dude who like tried to do stuff for himself, keep himself as number one always. I think
I
like,
wouldn't
everyone
fully agree with that, because I would urge those that really have the time and maybe I guess who want to read his book called My Life Outside the Ring, and it'll give you a whole different perspective on this guy, and then talk to me about those things. And I won't knock you if you've read the book. So here's the thing. Yeah, he has said some questionable things. He has arguably done some questionable things as a person, but as a wrestler, man, this
As a
guy was
character,
insane. The character Hulk Hogan, Hulkamania, who he stood up to, who he finally body slammed, and things like that. Like Andre the Giant, this guy messed up his back body slamming Andre the
Cesaro
Giant.
did it better versus Big Show.
Well, Lex Luger versus
Lex Luger and Yokozuna?
Right? So, but the thing is, Hulk Hogan was the first one to do something like that, and he messed up his back, and his whole leg drops after that, and took his back, and just
you gotta
work.
like the leg drop. Although it seems like such a chill move, like that,
that would hurt.
crushes his spine for sure.
It did,
All
but
that
imagine
weight.
being hit by a leg drop, like a real one.
Yeah, but yeah. Anyways, we won't get into the physics of wrestling.
Then he had like a supporting and like antagonistic cast, which was insane. Macho Man, Ultimate Warrior, who he fought
The
against.
Mega Powers.
Iron Sheik. Come on, you can't. You already.
That's why I used Iron Sheik, and then I went into Hulk Hogan because Hulk Hogan defeated him for the championship, and that's when he became sort of the American.
Am a real American.
That theme song, dude, best.
Yeah.
I used to put it on my CDs in high school and just listen to it.
It's a good theme song.
It's a good
All
theme
right, so let's move into Kush. You still have to do your last male, but I'll jump into my female. I'm gonna pick one that might be a little bit controversial, but given the impact she had on wrestling and particularly intergender wrestling at the time, I'm gonna go with China.
Oh my god!
I
was gonna pick her.
I think at the time she was the only one that was fighting males, making that impact. She came in as a bodyguard to Triple H, which was unheard of at the time.
Yeah,
right.
And he was skinny at that time too.
I mean, he was a big boy too, though.
But he was like skinny big boy at that time.
Yeah, compared to China. But I think China was pretty revolutionary in starting that dynamic. Like we see Sasha Banks with Charlotte Flair, she was the starting point of the redefining what women's wrestling could be. So that's going to be my female pick.
Yeah, like wrestling wasn't. I think we know like wrestling. The women didn't get much wrestling time. Even like before, even after. So like she was with DX and Triple H like pre or late 90s, but like even then she wasn't showcased as much. It was like early 2000s where she started like really getting in the ring, winning the Intercontinental title, all those things, right? Showcasing that like, damn, this girl is crazy and she can wrestle and beat up dudes no problem. Which obviously a lot of dudes are probably like, oh shit. But yeah, she was great, man. Incredible. She inspired a lot of people for sure. It's sad that she had like a lot of issues with WWE because of like the Triple H stuff and Stephanie because like, yeah, she should be in the Hall of Fame for sure. But yeah, that's a great pick.
All right, Kush, who's your last one on your mountain before the honorable mentions?
Okay, this is tough because I'm doing it on the fly. I'm just like, I'm torn if I should go with like another modern wrestler, like today's wrestler, because Daniel Bryan's pretty much like at the end of his career. So I'm wondering if I should go with somebody who's in the middle, or if I should go with my heart. But I think I'll pick, since it's a Mount Rushmore, not necessarily my favorite. I'll go with Kozuchika Okada, and this guy is from New Japan Pro Wrestling. This is not somebody most people will know because this is, as the name's indicated, of the promotion. It's a Japanese promotion, and New Japan Pro Wrestling really started taking off around 2013, 2014 with the really what their focus is on incredible wrestling, just pure wrestling, with a little bit of entertainment and like them cutting promos and talking on the mic. But that stuff's really like secondary, even like thirdary. I know that's not a word, but it is now. so their focus is just pure great entertaining wrestling with storytelling. And to me, Kazuchika Okada, I think, is the best wrestler on the planet.
And when you like, I'm not a huge New Japan guy, but when you say New Japan, that's the first name that comes to my mind. He's that larger than life character, but also his move set and like his impact in wrestling is, and even like with New Japan, like you see wrestlers from North America going over there on purpose. The Chris Jericho's, the Kenny Omegas, the John Moxley's, right? They're going over there for a reason. They know like that's quality stuff.
Yeah, a lot of people want to go and work there and like do a part-time thing, right? Like you got a lot of gaijins, as they say, or people of not Japanese descent who are living there and working in that promotion, such as Will Ospreay, Juice Robinson, formerly known as CJ Parker from NXT, amongst others, right? So a lot of different guys who are doing well, but like their quality of wrestling is just so good. And the thing with Okada, of course, everyone knows his series against Kenny Omega, those 4 matches, which if we have time to do like best series of all time, like that's probably going to be mine. But he and Kenny put on, those are the best matches I've ever seen. Like I don't know what else to say, right? Like those 4 series are just amazing. It's hard to recall better matches than that. And so like the thing is, like people will say like, oh, but without Kenny, you know, what is he? But the thing is, like Okada has put on, to me, a lot more memorable or like instant classic matches, or as we call like 5 stars, than anyone else kind of current day. And he does it with anyone. Like he really can do it with anyone if he's given the time. If he knows he has that time in the ring, he tells an incredible story. He can work with anyone. His moveset's incredible. And he's just one of the best wrestlers in the world that I've best wrestler on the planet, in my opinion. So yeah, currently.
Right. And Pat, with your female pick.
I was gonna pick China, but you know, I'll let you have China. Now I struggled here because I'm from the 80s, and the 80s had a lot of WWF females, but they weren't wrestlers. So I couldn't pick Elizabeth or anybody like that because she wasn't technically a wrestler. Okay. So I went with Lita. Okay.
Yeah.
So I went with Lita. I think her name was Amy Dumas or something.
Yeah.
Her real name. And so I went with Lita because simply she was part of the, I think, the Hardy Boys. And she used to come out with the Hardy Boys, who were one of the most dynamic duos in wrestling when I was watching. And they were doing some crazy stuff. And that whole hardcore wrestling, flying off the top, the acrobatics, all that sort of stuff. So Lita did that as well, but on the female side, in her female match.
So I think she was one of the first to kind of do that high flying style for females. So I think that's a very solid
on TV for sure.
Yeah, on TV for sure. And so I'm going to go with Lita on that one, and I'll just keep it simple and just say that much.
That's a great pick because she's like, she was a great wrestler in that era also.
I remember watching her do moonsaults. Yeah, I'm like watching her do moonsaults. I'm like that.
You're like, yo, she can do a moonsault? Yeah, it's like, wow. It was crazy.
You can do stuff like that, like Rey Mysterio was doing too. Like, it's just,
100%.
I would love to see them fight each other.
All that stuff.
So, as we're wrapping up the show, let us know who's on your Mount Rushmore. Let us know in the comments below. Message us on Twitter or Instagram at Pardesi_Beats. But like we said, it's such a hard thing to name. Who's your top 4? Boom, go. So quickly here, we'll just list off maybe 1 or 2 honorable mentions. The one that I left off for me significantly was Sting. Like I mentioned at the start of the show.
It's Sting! It's sorry. Had a moment there.
Like I mentioned at the start of the show, my first interaction with wrestling was WCW. So I was kind of loyal to WCW for a bit. And Sting being the character who never went to WWE for the longest time, but was still well-known, WCW, TNA. Even when he went to WWE, he didn't really flounder, although they really tried to make him flounder. For me, my honorable mention.
They tried to make him flounder?
They tried to bury WCW as they always do. But anyways, that's one of my honorable mentions. And my other one, my favorite wrestler growing up was Yokozuna. Agile big man. Like I have to give him a shout out. Yoko was larger than life, literally and figuratively. And like I was convinced, yeah, he's a Japanese guy, but he was actually Samoan from the same story, like same descent as Umaga, Roman Reigns. So
Yeah, crazy how these
Yokozuna,
Samoans are just so incredible.
really,
Rikishi,
really good
right?
at wrestling. Yeah, same
Yeah.
family
Yeah.
lineage. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Yokozuna and Sting are my 2 honorable mentions.
Cool. My honorable mention is the guy I'm wearing. In reality, he's my favorite wrestler probably ever, CM Punk. I think he is the best promo to ever grace the wrestling world. The Rock is definitely the most entertaining, but when they had their promo, CM Punk held his own and he kind of put the Rock down as well. And really hard to see anyone go up against the Rock. The only other person who kind of did was John Cena, and I'd say the Rock got the better of him for sure. And yeah, like just CM Punk, everyone knows the pipe bomb, the epic pipe bomb.
I don't know if everybody does, but wrestling fans know.
Okay, yeah, wrestling fans. It was a dark period of wrestling. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
The darkest of dark ages of wrestling, and this guy was like a beacon of light. That's essentially what it was.
That's a very fair way to put it.
Yeah, and like if you don't know what I'm talking about, just if you YouTube CM Punk pipe bomb, it'll come up. And he just everything he's did in his promo was just so real, right? Like you just related to it, and so I just respected that so much about who he is. And I still am a fan of his now. I follow him. I followed him into his UFC career. He does a lot of acting or directing now and things like that. He did a lot of comic book work. So I love following the guy because I just always thought he was a really just real dude. And yeah, his wrestling was great. I don't think it was like epic, phenomenal, like the highest of echelons, but it was all great and above. So that's one honorable mention. And the other one, I don't know.
Even if you don't have one, that's cool. I just needed this.
I do. Like I'll say, I guess I don't know for dudes, but like for I'd say Trish, man, Trish Stratus. Yeah. Like the other thing was obviously as like a young kid, you're like, oh damn, this chick is hot. That was what worked for like.
And she was Canadian.
Yeah, dude, she was the Canadian chick from Toronto. And she's like she moved back home as well, right? So she's still like is based out of like Canada, doing her thing, representing the country. And she has her hands in like a lot of different projects. And then she was like, first she like the way she kind of elevated her career was really cool because she went from those typical like sexist promos, like embarrassing promos, and like having to like lick dog puke or whatever and stuff like you know what I'm talking about, Malik, those promos she did with Vince McMahon, right?
Yeah.
And turning into
where she was his slave or whatever.
Yeah, like it was like there was stupid stuff, but like back then it was cool to do that stuff, right? Or it was okay. Now we're just like, whoa man, I can't believe that flew. But then she transitioned into like the more wrestling centered side of things, right? Like I said, like the early 2000s for females wrestling. Really,
yeah, I remember the WrestleMania match, Mickey James and Trish.
Yeah, and like what an interesting storyline that was, right? So like yeah, like you kind of saw like women's wrestling going up, and then it definitely took a dip, and then it's
back now. For sure.
Yeah, it's on the up and up. But like yeah, like she was one of the people who kind of started that revolution of women's wrestling for wrestling, rather than like eye candy and embarrassing promos or just male testosterone, like those kind of things, right? Appealing to those things. So
shout out to Deborah.
Too. Yeah, Deborah is synonymous with JR.
But she's not a wrestler though, so
a manager.
Go walk your
Pat.
dogs.
Your one or two honorable mentions.
Okay, well, they're not the ones pictured. I just felt like giving him a shout out, so there he is, Kamala. But at the same time, it's hard to pick on just 2 honorable mentions, especially coming from the 80s.
It's impossible. It's impossible.
But okay, so I do have 2. One of them is he was a very Wolverine type of wrestler. And when I say Wolverine, I'm talking about the Marvel characters. And who I'm referring to, I get rid of my backgrounds. Who I'm referring to is Chris Benoit, Edmonton boy, very like low key, like brawling, technical style wrestler. Many other opinions on Chris Benoit, but I think he was a good wrestler. Like you watched him, and he wasn't very like on the mic type of guy. He just came out and did his thing, and so he's one of my honorable mentions. And then and the other one's going to be Andre the Giant, because Andre the Giant,
he was a giant.
he literally suffered from giantism, which was a genetic issue, which a lot of these big wrestlers who came after him had and
the Big
have.
Show, yeah, the Big Show had it, but he got it. He got it.
But some had it from
surgery for
different extremes, right? Some had it more bad for their health type of way. Like Andre the Giant's wasn't a good thing. He was also in a few movies, and he was actually one of Hulk Hogan's really, really good friends.
Yeah, the Princess Bride was like he was one of the first to ever act as a wrestler in a movie. So definitely Andre's larger than life.
So I haven't seen that movie, but everyone keeps telling me to watch it just because Andre's in it.
Watch it; it's kind of cool. So yeah, Andre the Giant, and just that whole storyline in the '80s with Andre and Hulk Hogan, and just that whole thing was so iconic.
The body slam.
The body slam, but that shaped that hope and that electric feeling you saw when Andre lost that match to Hulk Hogan was just like huge. Oh, and that was what, WrestleMania 3, I believe.
Yeah.
And that was like 83, 84 or whatever.
And that was also on the downturn of Andre's career. Like he was going downhill at that point.
Yeah, he was
in his peak. Yeah.
But that the character that Hulk Hogan destroyed, literally.
But then like that giant story. Yeah, I agree. That's exactly where I was going. It was that giant character. We saw that with Lex and Yoko. The big body slam.
It came back to bite Hulk Hogan in the butt at, what was it, Survivor Series, where Yokozuna beat him for the title, and then it wasn't clear, and then Bret Hart came in, and and then Hulk Hogan had to fight Bret Hart for it later.
That's so stupid. That's one of those moments where you're like, screw off, Hulk.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter. But the thing is, Hulk should have won it in the initial match. Whatever. I don't care.
And I mean, and like we talked about, wrestling is very subjective. We talked about at the start of the show. We all have our own opinions on it. We've all grown.
I gotta throw one more in, man. I gotta throw Macho Man Randy Savage just because.
Yeah, you can't not, right? When we talk about the aesthetics of wrestling, Macho Man, Ric Flair, those guys.
Because nobody else mentioned them, so I had to. Yeah, and Ric Flair.
We all know. Randy Savage is like iconic. It's just like he's always like, if you're gonna rank top 10, he's in there. But the thing is, I think like a lot of our favorites go in here too a little bit, right?
There's a lot of personal opinion.
That was definitely very, very favoritism in mine.
Yeah.
So with time in mind, let's wrap up the show here. Let's do one quick everyone's favorite match. Okay.
Favorite, like just watching on TV. Yeah. Okay.
I'm gonna go with one that I saw in person because it's still one of my favorite matches to ever watch.
Okay.
2004 Backlash at I know it's gonna be a different match. It's not the one you're thinking. I watched versus Mankind. Mick Foley versus Randy Orton. I am a sucker for hardcore matches, and that was my first experience seeing wrestling live.
I think that's the one I was referring to.
And I got to see Mick Foley and Randy Orton. Like
that in Edmonton?
Yeah, that was in Edmonton.
Yeah, that's the match. That's the match.
So
were you there? Did we all go?
I don't remember. I was in the nosebleeds. It was the first time I remember going.
Was he with us?
No, we did not know each other at that time.
We knew each other, but we weren't buddies. Yeah.
So for me, that was like, I'm hooked to wrestling. Like that's one of the greatest matches I've seen in person.
I remember Randy Orton watching it falling out of Randy Orton's back.
Yeah.
And watching it.
That's the one. That's the match I was alluding to earlier. Yeah.
If you go back and watch it now, it still holds up. It's still one of my favorite matches.
Yeah. I couldn't figure out who he was fighting. I thought it was Eddie Guerrero for some reason, but in fact it was Randy.
Maybe Orton. Eddie Guerrero's hair, but not the body type. That's for sure.
Yeah. Kush, greatest match you've seen in person or just in general? Greatest match?
Okay, I'll give you in person. On TV is so many, but like in person, I had the luxury of taking myself to Tokyo and going to watch New Japan Pro's version of WrestleMania. Wrestle Kingdom live a couple years ago. So I got to see the very, very famous and world-renowned Kenny Omega in action against New Japan's biggest star, who was kind of fading at that time for Okada, Hiroshi Tanahashi. So Kenny Omega versus Hiroshi Tanahashi for the IWGP Heavyweight Championship. And so Tanahashi is like the fan favorite there because he carried New Japan during like dark ages.
Yeah.
And New Japan is like the biggest wrestling promotion there nowadays because of like the work he put in. That match was like magic because everyone loved Omega, even like all the Japanese people, because he was.
But they were divided. They're like,
yeah, exactly. And Tanahashi's literally like he is what John Cena should have always been, but for like New Japan's version, and they did him perfectly. Like they didn't mess up. Like John Cena's just shoved down your throat. But Tanahashi, everyone wanted him. Like this guy's like kind of like a wrestling god there, and like the match they had. The fans were hooked. You could just honestly like you feel like electricity, kind of like you just feel
it's
like
also
the energy.
it's also a different experience watching in Japan because the fans aren't as ruckus as they are in North America.
No, they're not, but they were loud for that match, which makes it even more crazy because like everyone's like on the edge of their seat because like the match was so close, and then just hearing a lot of fans were disappointed that Kenny Omega didn't win, but we know why afterwards, because he started his own promotion and left and didn't re-sign with New Japan. But still one of the most incredible matches. I absolutely love Hiroshi Tanahashi.
You also went to a wrestling match in Mexico, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I went to a Father's Day special in some random abandoned mall in Cancun. A little shady to get there, but yeah, they had some Lucha Libre wrestling live.
Well, that's cool.
We were the only people sitting in the front row because I guess we could afford it. But that was a cool show.
That's cool because you've seen and in Hulk Hogan's book, My Life Outside the Ring, I read a lot about these things, and he was always in Japan.
Yeah,
and how
Japan is like the mecca of pure wrestling.
And here's the thing, like you see WWE matches on like whatever days. Back then it used to be Saturday with those in that time. But in between he'd fly to Japan and he'd be in Japan fighting for 2-3 matches, come back here fighting one that was unknown and go and
you
do
could see him
WWE.
lose and actually wrestle. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You'd see him as a technical wrestler, which wasn't really his thing. But yeah. So at the end of the day, I think. Is it my turn now? Are you good?
Yeah. No, you're good.
So my favorite match that I ever saw live was the same one as Malik's. It just blew my mind. Like it really changed it because it was live, and it wasn't like TV. Go
back.
Angles.
No, go back and watch it. Go back and watch it. It's still unreal.
Was it televised?
Yeah, it was a pay-per-view.
It was the pay-per-view
Backlash
right after Chris Benoit became the champion at WrestleMania.
Yeah.
That's why
Chris Benoit came out in the Oilers
jersey. That's why I was back in wrestling because I was Chris Benoit.
That's when like the mayor made it Chris Benoit Day in like Edmonton.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But that match still holds up.
That match, oh my God, was insane. And I've never seen anything like that in my life. And seeing Mick Foley and Randy Orton, look at the two of them, and they're fighting each other. So you see Randy Orton, who was the typical muscular guy.
He was also up and comer at the time too, right?
And he wasn't like a rookie almost.
Yeah, he was, but he was still like he's a son of like a legend, right?
Yeah.
And then
I mean, arguably he's a legend.
Third generation.
Well, now he's a generation.
He's the not arguably he is a legend.
No, but his dad at that time I'm talking about. And then he's fighting Mick Foley and they're doing all that crap. Mr. Socko comes out. But so it was epic. Malik, you already explained it. People need to watch it. We can't say it all here. But my favorite match that I ever watched in recent history, I would say is Rock versus Hulk Hogan.
Yeah, WrestleMania. That's definitely
17. No, 18. Sorry,
18.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So with that, we will wrap up the show. Make sure you follow us on our social media at Pardesi_Beats on Instagram and Twitter. Make sure you listen to us on the go. We're available on all streaming platforms. Give us a 5-star rating. That's it for today's show. Let us know who's on your Mount Rushmore, who your favorite wrestlers of all time are.
Let's talk wrestling. At me, guys. I love talking wrestling. At me at Chota Share, CHHOTASHER on Twitter, man. Let's do it.
All right. Until next time, take care.